Oopsie, I already started.
Surprise! Oh my goodness. That's hysterical. Hello, everyone.
Me and you and everyone we know. How's everybody's summer going? Rachel, you go first.
Summer's good. I feel like I'm in the dog days, though. I'm like counting down the days to when my
It doesn't
kids
say
go
we've
back to
started
school.
on LinkedIn yet, by the way.
Okay, well, I don't know what to say about that because I don't know how to fix it. So there we go.
Just kidding. Now it's going.
Yeah. Right, because you guys have kids. Margaret, you have some news.
I've got a lot of news. And also, my kid, thankfully, is in daycare still. So it's all summer long. I don't have the hectic nature of the summer breaks, finding other childcare and stuff. So my summer's a little bit more normal, but I do have news. I joined one of my longest clients, Coderis, that I've been working with for 2 years as CMO. So I'm back in-house after for the last 2 years saying I would never do such a thing. But yeah, I'm loving it. I'm about a month in of full time and it feels good.
I love that. And I love you. And I can't wait for all the fights we're going to get in.
I know. It's so good.
Don't you think it's going to make the banter better?
I think so too. Yeah. It's a different POV. I get to change my point of view on some things, which is always fun.
Yeah. That's very cool. I'm very excited.
Thanks.
I don't have any kids and it's been wonderful. I've gotten to spend the summer with my friends' kids, various friends' kids. I actually just came from Erica Schneider's house. I think I'm becoming like an honorary family member, which I love. So I get to dote on other people's children who are adorable and so fun to play with. And then I get to go home and drink wine and go outside with my dog and do whatever
in the morning.
Yes, which I'm terrible at. But I'm going to have some news soon coming up. But yes, but I have to talk to Rachel first. And
no pressure.
I've been working on some stuff. So
I like just the general teasing, no information, but information kind of thing. That's really fun.
Leave us questioning.
Yes.
Yeah. Leave us wanting more.
There is a thing that people have said to me my whole career that I've said no to, and now I might be saying yes to it.
Oh, it's the summer of saying yes to things that you said no to previously.
For me personally, or just every? Oh, no, yes, because everyone. Yeah. Okay, but the reason we're here is because we have been on this journey together with Rachel for the past almost two years. Almost 2 years.
No way.
Year and a half.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie. I don't know what day it is. And that journey has been launching this podcast, which Rachel and Katie guided us through doing, and then producing the show, growing the show, most notably sort of creating an audience around ourselves and the show. And that's been a really fun ride. We learned a lot. And I feel like at least tomorrow, I'm talking to some people who want to launch a podcast for their travel business. And like, they're like, what should I do? Like, what's your advice from someone who had done it? And I'm like, wow, I have a lot. And Rachel, obviously you do this for a living and you've been curating sort of your, creator community, which that's not what you call it, but I forget what you were calling it. And with like Devin Reed and Jay Acunzo and Kyle Lacey, and you've been growing their audiences as well. So we're here to talk about growing an audience.
And I just have one funny anecdote before we jump in. I went to a barbecue competition this past weekend and like met like this like professional like barbecuer that like goes around the entire United States, wins a whole bunch of things. And he mentioned that he then, after he met me, went and listened to a podcast episode. So it's like, it's beyond not even just like growing your audience within. Like, I feel like having the podcast allows you to like grow your audience and connect your POV like randomly to, for us, like non-tech, software people, which is just wild.
That actually is really funny.
We'll let Rachel talk at some point.
Yeah, no, you're coming in. But I remember going to whatever that conference was I went to in April, the Audience Plus conference. And I told you, Margaret, I was like, people kept coming up to me and being like, oh my God, you're Devin? Don't say content. Like, where's Margaret? And I was like when I left Animals, like I had my head down so far when I ran Animals that like Erica was telling me the other day that she like saw me at an event and she was like, oh my God, that's like, I didn't know anyone knew who I was when I left Animals. Yeah. And then I found out after, but then it was like, so it's like, I didn't know. And then with the podcast though, it's like right in front of you. Like people are like, oh my God, don't say content. And I'm like, are you
How
sure?
do you know that? We just made it up.
Well, I think there's two things that I think are really interesting. And then I want to ask you two some questions as part of this conversation more than anything. But one of the things I think is really interesting that you kind of alluded to is this idea of like you are in all of these places that people see you and can connect with you. And so sometimes it's less about, is my audience listening to the podcast? And it's more about how are people engaging with the content I'm putting out that I'm able to generate from my podcast. And so kind of even wanting to lean into that for a second and ask the two of you, you said yes to starting a podcast. You were both in like season of transition and change and like openness. And so I'm curious, like what made you say yes to starting a podcast a year and a half or so ago?
Margaret, you go first.
Yeah, I was in a real like, I don't want to like now I feel like I can't curse, which is really funny. I have to figure that out. I was in a real like F it part of my life. Like, why not? Right? Like, why not do this thing? And I think we have that episode about audacity, but I was really embracing this season of audacity in my life. And it made me feel finally like I was ready to do something like that. But I also think that I was at a point in my career that I realized that I did have something to say and that it was different from what other people were saying or what I was hearing. And I felt like I was in my professional life constantly having to re-educate founders and other like non-marketing folks about what it all means and what it all is. And I realized that I did have actually like something to say. And I think that's what it was, is for a long time, I thought that I had nothing to say because everyone must know what I know, right? Like I can't possibly have a unique thought in my brain. So it was like, I think it was both like a personal maturity, professional maturity, and then also to your point, a season of transition where I was like, whatever, I can do whatever I want.
Also, hi, Jane.
Hi, Jane.
Actually, Jane and I became friends at Golden Hour. That's how we met. And then I was like, we had one phone call and we were like, we are friends. It was like that meant to be. Okay, I did the podcast because I wanted something that was mine, that I didn't have to like, and by mine, I mean ours, Margaret, but like mine as in it didn't belong to a company. It was like something that, something fun and creative, collaborative, because I'm usually kind of resistant to doing things on my own, like work-wise. I just like need that motivation of somebody else. And so, Jane, you're the best. Seriously. I was
just creeping on Jane this morning. That is so weird.
Yeah.
Like, anyways, hey, what's up, Jane? That was me creeping on you today.
Yeah. Amazing. So yeah, I just wanted something where I could do whatever I wanted with it, with a partner, and start to like own myself a little bit more. Yeah. Plus I just thought it was fun. I was like, I want to see what people are going to do. Like I was excited by trying new marketing stuff on my own behalf. I just was like, let's,
So did you have any preconceived like goals or ideas around audience, like expectations even? Like what were your thoughts going into it? Like, will people listen? Will they care? Like,
what did we say? We were like,
well, I was
crying all the time. I was like, is anyone gonna listen?
I think we very much swung back and forth between like, we didn't set like actual numbers of what we wanted, but the fear of like, does this even matter? Like, will anyone care? Was, I feel like, between like conception of the podcast to launch of the first couple episodes, that's when like that biggest fear hit. And then when we started to hear anecdotal feedback of people saying, oh, I listened to it, or like, and now that even, picks up where we get DMs or people message us, like text us. Like I have a bunch of friends that will text and be like, hey, I just listened to that episode from like a couple months ago and it really resonated with me. And so I think that once that started picking up, that fear kind of subsided, and it was like, oh yeah. And also like when we post the videos on LinkedIn, clips from the podcast, and it actually sparks engagement in conversations, like that went away pretty quickly. But I think also not having it tied to a company where you have to have like growth goals and show the value of it was really helpful to just kind of like take that bit of it off of our, I don't know, anxiety plate.
I felt exactly what Margaret's. I wasn't scared, and then I was scared right at the end. You all remember. But what was really cool was like once it got out there, I think it made me a little bit more brave to promote my own stuff.
Yeah.
Because we asked for like, we went to our friends and we're like, will you listen to this? And like, will you rate it and review it? Like, we really want, or like, I know I in particular was really motivated by that. And I just realized I was like, I've done like a lot of favors, and I've just been really active in the community. And so it made me a lot braver in like asking for things that I need. And it was really cool to see how our community just rallied around us. Like no one said no. They were just like, yeah, like let's get in here. So that was a really fun part of it, where it forced me to get out of my comfort zone, both in publishing something directly under my name and then in promoting it and asking for help. And then I definitely feel like it boosted my confidence and my bravery by a lot. Like I am more forthcoming about asking for stuff now. And that was really convenient because I needed to ask for more when I launched my consulting business, and people showed up for that too. So
I want to lean into a couple of things that both of you said, but before we kind of jump all around, I am curious, has your perception of audience growth changed over time? Like what good looks like, what success looks like as it relates to audience numbers specifically?
I guess I care less like about the like I think, well, sorry, this has been like a great education for me in person, like the next level of kind of personal brand building, because at first I'm just competitive. So I see numbers and I'm like, well, can we make them bigger? And we've talked about this ad nauseum, so I'm not going to go super into it, but like Margaret was kind of my counter energy there. And then I started seeing it as like getting the right people around us. And what that did was lead to a lot of benefits. Like a publisher approached me about a book deal. Sponsors reached out to us organically to do stuff. Like more people were reaching out to be guests on like it kind of just like happens where like you're out there more, and like the influx of opportunities come your way more without you like we tried on the sponsorship stuff a little bit at one point because we were like thinking about doing some bigger stuff, but like it just happened at us.
Yeah.
And that's really cool.
Yeah. Well, it's so funny, Rachel. I don't think it changed my perception of it, but it's a great question because it further entrenched and almost reminded me, like when I ran content programs at, I've got a fly in here. When I ran content programs at Envision and then at AppQs, I would always say like the benefit of this or the goal of this is not about every single piece like something grows, right? Like every single blog post has more like page views than the one before it or whatever it is. It's about the consistency of it. And that's where most people miss is they don't do it long enough and consistent enough to be able to grow, right? Like growth tends to be organic and it does not tend to be exponential. But like that is like the slow plodding of doing the program. And it's hard because within companies, that's not the thing that gets celebrated, right? It's like, especially in like high growth tech companies or VC-backed tech companies, the thing that gets celebrated is the thing that like influxes really quickly and like, oh, yeah, you did a good job. And like the poor person that's just like keeping the content train running, it's like, they never get kind of a congratulations or kudos. And so it very much reminded me that of like having done this now. I think our first one was February of last year. So I think we're like a year and a half plus in. And it's like this year we've seen very much like, we've seen more of those like anecdotal moments, more of like when you went to that conference and people were talking about don't say content and whatnot, like that's happened kind of a year after we started the podcast. And that doesn't mean it wasn't successful. And we also probably could have hustled harder at the beginning if we had like specific audience growth goals. But I don't know. Like, I think it was a good reminder that it's just about the consistency of it.
And that we knew who we were talking to going in,
Yeah.
so that we naturally attracted the people we wanted to be talking to. And that was really cool. Like, +1 for knowing who you're talking to before you get going and really narrow that down. So I think that really helped also.
Yeah.
When it seems like you've almost created or cultivated like a cult following.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, if you could say these are the things that we did to do that, what would you say like attributed to that outcome?
We were ourselves.
Yeah.
Like unabashedly.
And I think we said the quiet parts out loud.
Yeah.
Like I think when I hear folks, when episodes have like resonated with the most folks, it tends to be the things that everyone has been thinking or like had in their brain, but either didn't have the time to sort through it in their brain to be able to speak about it eloquently enough, which I'm not saying we always do, or that they like have thought about it but aren't brave enough to like say it out loud. And I think that those are the things that then create that like resonance of like, oh, they get me, because like I've had this thought too, and either I like just didn't know how to say it, or like I felt like I couldn't say it, but look at them like out there saying it.
Also, Margaret, how many people when you talk to them are like, I know you hate the word content.
Yeah. Oh my God. Everyone's like, I know I can't say content to you. I'm like, no, you're allowed to say it. Just like say what it means to you when you're saying it.
That's true. A lot of people do say that to us. Like our chemistry is really strong.
That's so cute.
I'm curious about that, the note on chemistry, but also like, do you feel like you were able to be more sort of brave or like speak into the things that other people weren't saying because you didn't have brands behind you?
Oh yeah.
Or yeah. And like, how do you think that's going to shift or change, especially Margaret, for you, like stepping into this, like how were you starting to think about that?
I don't think I can curse right now. Yes, absolutely. I think that made a huge difference for us to both be untethered, where we were like joking around one time that like the goal of the podcast is to become unemployable.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, I did too. I forgot. I remember you saying that though. Yeah.
I was like, let's just become unemployable. Let's just not want anyone to attach their brand to us. I think that was really, truly helpful. I'll try to not let it change me, but I think that, I think when you have, especially like an executive layer of leadership at a company, you have, responsibility to not do anything to tarnish the company's brand. So I'm sure that there'll be a little bit more, I don't know, a little bit more reservation. But the good thing about it is like the company I joined and the CEO that I'm working with, we're so value aligned on the idea of what marketing could be, what it should be, how to make decisions, like what to prioritize. It's very much like a long game kind of company, which I really appreciate. So it's not, I think if I was working at another company that I wasn't as value aligned with, there would be a lot more editing or like, personal editing of ideas and content and whatnot. But I feel less concerned about that because I spent my time to pick a company that I'm really value aligned with.
I feel like my answer is going to be so obvious to everyone. I don't care. I didn't even care on animals. I just was like, you know what I mean? It was just sort of like, I don't care. And obviously, like, I'm not saying everything I say behind the scenes on the show already.
I know. So imagine what a personal conversation with Devin is like.
Filter. Yeah.
So I don't care. And I wouldn't join a company. I think I'm just going to stop there.
Yeah.
Well, I know, but like, yeah, I think the brand, like the freedom of the brand, wasn't much for me, but I think the freedom of having been out there in so many different roles publicly made me already in a place where I was like, I'd already crested that hill of giving a shit what anyone thought about me. So it was like kind of nice, but then I still did worry. But like, I think the more we did it, the less I cared. Just to answer Jane really quick, we got on the phone because Margaret was leaving her job and she was like, hey, I'm leaving my job. And I was like, hey, me too. And she was like, what? And we got on a call and one of us was like, saying how, or they're like, I kind of want to start a podcast. And I was like, me too. And then we just like, it happened from there. Like we just.
And we were friends for a while before, like when Devin would come back up from New York. Like, we weren't friends. We didn't know each other when you lived here in Boston, but every time you would come back up. And when I was at AppQ's, we were a customer of Animals, client of Animals. And so that's how we got connected. And then every time she would come up, we would have, drinks or coffee or lunch. And we were just stayed kind of in each other's circles for a while. So, just friends. And it was very podcast bro of us to be like, our conversations are awesome. We should have a podcast. It was like the same kind of like the joke that goes around of like, oh man, like we're a lot of fun. We should definitely have a podcast. That's how we felt.
But also we were right. So it's fine. And Rachel said we were good. Cause I remember asking you a bunch of times. I'm like, because Rachel, I had already hired her at Animals to relaunch our podcast. And then I had to ghost her because I left in the middle of it. And then when we finally caught up, I was like, I love you. I'm sorry. And she's like, I don't care. Let's do something. Yeah. And I was like, that's great. Cause I was going to ask you.
And I do think if we hadn't had Rachel so bought it, like you were so bought in, you believed in us, you like held our hands and got it out the door. I don't know if Devin and I would have been able to do this thing. Like definitely not on our own.
The number of emails that Katie or you sent us where you were like, said something that we needed to do or like I was like, I never thought that.
So there's two things. There's one thing. One is I always think that creating content, no matter what phase of life you're in, but like actually getting on the microphone and putting yourself out there is a vulnerable act. And so the fact that you two had already been willing enough to do that, I think is commendable. But I'm curious about your perspective on one side here. When it comes to like audience growth and engagement, there's really like two types of camps that people kind of fall into. One is you've built a career and you have people who are already paying enough attention to you. You launch a program, they're like, ready and willing and eager. And there's the other side where it's like, what if you haven't been out there and people don't really know about you? You don't have an audience. Would you advise them to launch a podcast or a program, like this? Or would you say, no, you got to earn your stripes before you launch?
I have been trying to get Robert Morton to start a podcast since I met him 2 years ago. He has one called The Podcast with No Listeners, and none of you can download it because quite literally they're like files in Google Drive. And he's like the most compelling person. He's finally like starting to think about going in that direction and just like friend to friend. I've been talking to him about it and I'm like, you absolutely should, because who you are as a person is really interesting. You have like unique insights in the area in which you operate. He's like a former CMO and now he does customer insights and he's just this like fascinating guy. P.S. He looks like he's short on the computer, but he's like aggressively tall, like so tall, and the nicest man you've ever met in your life and super interesting. So I think, I don't think about a lot of the like YouTube stars and stuff is like, I don't think you need, it just depends on what you're looking to do. But like, if you like, you can grow, look at Erica Schneider is the perfect example actually, because she just like busted on the scene apparently a year ago. And now I like literally thought she was a celebrity when I met her. Like she came to my thing and I was like, oh my God, like you are. So she hadn't even been in the content marketing world too long.
Yeah.
And it's like, she made it happen. So she is proof that like, you don't need a brand. And actually these days, I actually think the brand in certain areas can kind of hurt you a little bit because there is that perception that you're talking for the brand a little bit. So having some independence from the brand can even, you might even help you help the brand more.
Yeah. I know that earlier I mentioned that like the reason why I finally felt ready is because I felt like I'd earned my stripes. But to Devin's point, like, unless you're coming out saying, I know everything because I've done it all before. And it's like, you actually haven't done it before. And you're trying to give advice about how to do it when you haven't done it, which there are a fair share of people out there like that. As long as that's not your MO and you're like maybe you want to share how you're learning about something, or, you know, the little bit that you do know, and then asking for your audience to like educate you more on it or open up the conversation or whatever it is. Like, I think all of those things are absolutely valid. And it's not like you have to come in as a subject matter expert in a specific thing before you start.
You do need something though. Like, now that I think about it, I feel like we have a lot of privilege. Like, I'm like, we do have careers. So like we did, like some of the stuff we probably take for granted, like flew downriver, is like the people we knew to help us amplify it. And like,
that's what I'm thinking about, Devin, is like you were able to go cash in some favors in a way to help you.
But I think it would take longer to do it without that, but it doesn't mean you shouldn't, right? Because I think about all like the glowing, oh my goodness, a hair on, like a fly buzzing around, a hair in my hand. I think all like the like glowing secondary benefits that happen, because we were talking about how it builds confidence, and it even builds my own understanding of what I'm talking about when I can talk live with Devin about it, like helps crystallize even my own point of view on certain topics and whatever. Like, all of that is wonderful practice to get more confident at speaking, to get more confident at looking at your face in a, you know, in a screen, to get more confident about your own point of view. Like, I think like there's benefits of it, even if you are early with not a huge network, with whatever, because you can use it as a tool to get into the space that you want to get into.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, definitely. It's not that you shouldn't do it. I just keep realizing that like we didn't start from scratch, actually.
No.
Like we started from like, we'd been in the industry for a long time and built like honest friendships.
Yeah.
And so we definitely benefited from that. But to Margaret's point, like, I guess what I'm trying to say is like, you need something, and it doesn't have to be like a brand or fame or anything. It's just like, when I think about like, I don't know, like Erica, Amanda, Jay, Devin, like they all have a certain something, you know? Yes. Yeah. And I think Jay, because he's just been at it forever, but like other people just have like a character about them. And I think that like, I think if you're coming in without much, it's like, you're going to want to lean into something about you to make you like recognizable and distinct.
I like to think about that maybe in the way that you're talking about it, is like it's avoiding being sort of overexposed and underdeveloped. So it's like, if you don't know what you're talking about, if you don't have the tenure, don't show up with a microphone acting like you do. Instead, approach it with a discovery mindset, a curiosity, that kind of thing. From an audience growth perspective, though, I am curious, like, that did help. The fact that you had been cultivating and building an audience over time because you have an amazing career, amazing connections, et cetera. If somebody's coming in and they're launching a show and they're a brand or whatever, and they don't have a very big audience, is there anything that you would advise for them to do to help cultivate it when they launch a program like this, like a video or a podcast or something like that?
It really, like, okay, can we narrow it down a little bit? Because I feel like there's the like, it would be different for a brand or someone at a brand than like a person, right? Because say you're like a subject matter, like you're someone like us who's in an industry and they want to talk about it, right? Like a developer, for example, they're already deep in communities already. And so like, it would probably be easy for them in those like tighter knit communities to launch a show and get people to listen, because it would probably be born out of that community, right? Or like a YouTube channel or whatever, because they probably wouldn't do a podcast. And like a brand has presumably has a certain amount of money to throw at it. And so you can also go like, you have the option of, you have the ability, like the distribution of the show itself on these platforms. You have people around you can ask to start like listening to it, share it with people that they know, like you friends, ideally. And so like, there's not no one.
Like you're never starting at zero is your point.
Right. And so you just like go hit like we did too. Like, even though it's not like all these people magically listen to our podcast. Like we went and asked. We were like, will you share this? Will you listen? Will you comment? Please? Like people would text us praise and we'd be like, can you please go copy and paste that into like, put it there. And so I think the same thing is true. You can just hit the ground running and do your own, like, leverage your own people. Like, ask your mom and dad, like, if they know a ton of people who care about this, like, send it off to their friends. Like, and then you can think about cultivating a community, like your online community or your IRL communities. Like, I don't know, I think if you're willing to do the work, like, we could have grown a lot faster. Like, we've been, like, of your shows, we're probably the smallest, Rachel, because, like, we just sort of let it grow as it grew. We could have put our backs into it more. I know people that do more like paid ads and stuff to try to do audience building, like by platform, etc. We experimented for fun, but we were like, this is fine.
Yeah.
Wait, why do you stick with us?
I mean, I like you. I want to.
Yeah, but like, what's the...
So the thing about podcasting specifically, if we want to get specific into the niche of that, is that podcasting is a sea of niches. And so there's only, like, I don't know, the top 10 shows out there have been the top 10 shows forever. You know what I mean? So to me, like, if you're thinking about it from that perspective, it's like, from a business perspective, from my viewpoint, it's like, I want to work with the people who have a following of engaged people who care what they have to say, people that I want to work with, that I respect, and that when they speak, people listen. And it doesn't need to be everybody listens, but just the people that I want listening are listening. And so when you think about it from that brand perspective and audience growth mentality, it's not growth at all costs. It's growth for engagement. It's growth for the right reasons, for the right people. And podcasting is just so unique because it's already a sea of niches. And so if you can find the best people who can speak to those niches, then go all in.
Niches are itches. Niches scratch itches.
Yes. Yeah.
Aw. The other thing I'll say, though, that is the challenge that I imagine you come up against a lot, too, is, and my head always goes back to, like, VC-backed B2B software, right? And I think that there's a lot of companies right now that are having challenges of knowing who their target market should be and testing out multiple, like, bringing the product to multiple markets or to multiple segments of the market. And that is a challenging thing to do, to build a podcast, to do that, or to, like, strengthen that community if you're going to shift who that community is, especially because of the time frame it takes to be consistent and tell a story, and, you know, over that long period of time. And so I always go back to, like, when I have been advising heads of marketing, it's like, if you're in that, unless you have your target audience, target market locked in, and you know that's where you're going to be for a period of time, it's really hard to create, like, consistent brand saturation programs as tests, because the benefit is in the longevity of it. And there are different companies and different, even software companies, that build in a different way, that first find, like, a target audience and say, I'm going to map all their pain points, and no matter what, I'm going to be building for this segment. And then it's a lot easier and more productive to do something like a podcast program.
Yeah. And there's also the thing that I think that there's the intangibles that you were talking about earlier too, of, like, sometimes a show does allow you to articulate your point of view in a way that you don't have the ability to do otherwise, because it's such a forgiving medium. And so sometimes I would advise, even if you don't know who your target audience is, but you generally know what the things that you're going to talk about, or you want to understand your market more, or try and figure out who they are or what they like, have them on a show, interview them, ask questions, like, and you'll start to uncover things that maybe you wouldn't have thought about otherwise, which has nothing to do with audience growth, but it has more to do with, like, research and development and, like, understanding what makes sense for you and your company. So there's, like, so many use cases.
Yeah. Well, and that's exactly, like, case in point of the show that y'all just launched for Bright Idea that I got to be a co-host on, which is so exciting. And the CEO and the head of product is kind of behind the scenes helping run the podcast program. And it's all, like, interviews with customers about how they're thinking about innovation and how they're thinking about running these hackathon programs. And I've seen the benefit of just, you know, the two of them internally meeting with these customers and having these, like, not really super product folk conversations, but more like more about like theory, more about like point of view on innovation, and like really learning the language of the customer through these interviews. And then they can move that back into their marketing messaging. And that's super powerful. And you also get a podcast to distribute outside of it, right? So I totally agree with you there.
I think too, the brand, like for brands, it's so obvious because like if you are remotely clever, it's like the podcast is part of your like the podcast is the seed of your content program, which like everybody knows already. And so it's not even worth talking about. But like, I feel like that's like the case is still there is like, oh, your content, like you can just make more content from less now.
Yeah.
Because of these transcription tools that can help you, and that folks are using other platforms like audio and visual stuff more too.
I think like too, like from an audience growth perspective, just going back to the kind of what brought us here today. I think understanding like where you want that audience growth to occur makes a difference. So it could be like that idea of like net new, but also like your audience could just be customers or your audience could be employees. And it's like, maybe I'm standing up this program to help my employees understand what the company's all about, what we're doing, why we're doing it, what we care about, et cetera, et cetera. And so your audience growth metrics might just be employee numbers. And so I think like framing what audience numbers and what growth looks like for you as a company is a relevant data point.
That actually has helped us a bunch throughout this, because if we're like going through, like Margaret, you've reminded me of this multiple times. You're like, we're not going for everybody.
Yeah.
And once that sunk in, I was like, I started having a lot more fun.
But pro barbecue teams are my new niche that I'm going to try to infiltrate.
Yeah, for sure.
Spinoff series.
Sure. I'm on board fully. But like, if you think about it, like I think one thing that might be counterintuitive to some people, but if you're a marketer, probably not, is like, because we were so specific about who we were talking to. We were so specific about our stance on marketing and all, like we were really aligned on like, we mostly were like hating on stuff. We're like, this is like, that's kind of how we started. It was like all the things that we talk about that we rant about behind the scenes. With
ranty witches.
Yeah. And I think like the narrower and more specific you go, the more the richer it is. And I think the more people you can attract, because it's like, it's so specific. It almost in a way like rules more people in. Yeah. Like we got, we were targeting like marketing leaders, like directors and above. And then a lot of that's still our primary audience, like CEOs, founders, CMOs and stuff. But like, we still got that other sort of aspiring leader group. And so that was something, it's like you went narrow, like we cast a narrower net and that widened it.
Yeah. No, I totally agree.
Summer, I can't talk.
No, I think it's that idea of like the magnet, right? It's going to repel, like if you do it right, it repels the wrong people and attracts a lot of the right people and the people kind of like in the surrounding area of it. But Rachel, you were like literally speaking my language, because one of the first things that I did starting at this new company is I started a weekly internal podcast, and it is rough. I'm going to be very embarrassed to tell you that I didn't even think about editing it in GarageBand. I've been editing it in iMovie. My friend pointed out that I'm a big old idiot because I was doing that. So I was like, yeah. But what I do is I have like an AI note taker that also gives me the recordings on the Zoom call of my weekly call with the CEO. So we take 15 minutes to talk about one of the cultural values. He talks through why it's important. I edit it into this short little thing. I throw an Easter egg competition on the end of it of like, hey, now that you've listened to this full episode, the first person to go to this Slack channel and do this thing wins, and they get like 25 extra bucks on their paycheck at the end of the month. And so it's like, such a little thing, but like the engagement has been increasing week over week. And now we have it hosted on like the intranet, like the, company wiki that they can go back. And I'm like, this is going to be great for new hires. It's going to be great for we can send it to like candidates when they're like debating whether or not they're going to join the company. They can listen to these podcast episodes and really understand the values and how they show up and whatnot. And it was the first thing I did. And I was like, this is going to be incredible. But it's I load up the audio file to Google Drive and it's only internal and I upload it to Slack and it's not for public consumption. The secondary benefit of that is now the CEO is hearing himself speak in a podcast and is like, oh, I want to work on that thing. I want to work on that thing. And so it's like practice before we even then do like personal branding work, public facing for him in the future. So you're just speaking my language when you're like, it could be an internal podcast. And the metric is just like you kind of like cap your total addressable market, your TAM at like whatever your employee count is.
Leia Nobler, legend in the internal podcast space. I would say hers were videos, but it was like basically that. There was one every Monday. She edited it. It was like, she had this whole segment. She'd be like, "Dear diary." And she would like video herself in different like areas where I'm like fake writing in her diary and talk about like events that were coming up and like things that she interviewed, new hires. Like it was awesome. Yeah. It was like the best. Everybody loved it.
I put rap horns in the intro.
Yeah, there you go.
See, but that's the thing. It's like, that's the kind of stuff that brings your culture alive. So whether it's a brand show that's focused on growing brand awareness, or it's an internal show that's helping on like retention or recruiting or whatever, or you're using it to build pipeline or understand your point of view or whatever. It's like, the whole point is like, when you're thinking about audience growth and creating content, it's like understanding where you're starting and assigning the outcome to it and then design accordingly. And it doesn't have to be the number one show in Spotify, but it can be the best show for your community. And it allows you to, I'm curious, as we're like, I know we're getting close, but like, I am curious, like you started to talk about it. What were some of the unexpected like consequences, if you will, of launching the show?
Negative or positive?
Positive, all day positive.
I don't think there were any negative ones.
Yeah, I was gonna say, were there any negative? Now that you said that,
no.
I thought for sure we were gonna get hate mail at some point, and that never happened.
Yet.
Don't test me. Nobody test me.
No, I mean there's so many positive consequences that have come out of it, right? Like Devin was talking before about, there's been like inbound sponsorship opportunities. There's been like inbound advising opportunities that I've gotten, or people reaching out. This one woman that I went to college with, she was a sorority sister of mine. Haven't talked to her in however many years it's been since I graduated college. She reached out the other day that was like, "Hey, I've been watching your videos on LinkedIn and I work for this company and I have this problem. And I was wondering if maybe it's like, if you could advise, or if you have somebody else in your network," and like reconnecting with her where she wouldn't have seen me or thought of me if it hadn't been those things. So like, it's all of those types of things, which just become really magical when you show up consistently in a space and kind of remind people that you exist.
I'm going to say the fame part for me.
That's what you wanted. You wanted just to be paid for being who you are. That was your goal starting the podcast. I want to get paid for being who I am. I was like, that's awesome. I'll do that too. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Just because like, I don't know, it felt fun. It felt like, I don't know. And I think it like, the reason has to be right. Like, I think at the end of the day, this was always a business pursuit for me in some way. There was like, no, I know, Margaret.
I'm like, oh, you pitched me that it was not. So
I know, but like, like all along the way, I kept trying to make it that. And so it was more like in hindsight, like obviously, and I think it was just like, people have been telling me to start my own thing my whole career. And I'm always like, I just didn't think I was interested. And I think like this kind of showed me what that life could be like in a cool way. Cause like being CEO is cool and everything, but I didn't like know what was going on around me because I was so busy like being like doing the work. This allows me to like enjoy it a little bit too. And I think the fulfilling part to me was like being helpful was always a big part of my career, like coaching future leaders, particularly future female leaders. Like I am like the biggest like grizzly mama bear about like aspiring female leaders who like are usually getting stamped down in some way, and kind of like, and so I feel like Margaret and I, like it like gives me goosebumps. Like the us that we project here is like our strongest selves. And that includes when we're admitting being vulnerable. And I think I just like hope, like, it sounds so stupid. It sounds like I'm on like fucking 60 Minutes or something. I hope that the people who listen, but it is true. Like,
and world peace.
And I know, I'm like, ugh. But it is true, right? Like if I could build this, yeah, thank you. Although Margaret would be the beauty queen winner.
You nailed that. Like I was like, how does she?
I have been practicing my my pageant wave.
Yeah,
you can't really see it because it's such a.
But
short...
why? Like that? I feel like we need to explore the why behind that at some point.
Oh, it was a skill I wanted to learn.
Obviously,
I don't know.
It's also an excuse to reach out to random people. Because like we interviewed people a lot for stuff, and that was really fun. I'm glad we didn't do a guest format. Like we do it on here, but not for because like it gave us a chance to like, I don't know.
To Jane's point, like, and also like the episode we talked about that a lot, but the episode format of it just being Devin and I on the normal episodes, so to speak, was for that consistency of chemistry. Because we were like, if that's the secret sauce, if that's what people like about us, it does inherently sort of change the chemistry in a good way with you, Rachel. But like it changes the chemistry of the show when you constantly have guests on, and we really wanted to like hit that on a weekly basis so people would show up for the consistency of the chemistry, not like, oh, I don't know if I want to listen to that episode because last time the person that they had on was a dud and blah, 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 you know.
Yeah, you're my favorite. Like when we have guests on, it's always, it feels really flowy and fun when you're on.
Amazing. I'm glad to hear that. I like how I got to insert myself in this project. But it's been a fun like journey. And I just
made this project. Like you didn't insert,
you like made it. You two made it because it does take Pacific Content kind of branded this, but it really does take that Steve Pratt, frankly. But it's the creative bravery and courage. That's what makes a great content program. And the two of you had both of those things. You had both the courage to do this and the creative bravery to like just do you and not worry about bringing on guests or doing like different spiels and like you were just you. And I think that's what's
I ate sometimes. Okay.
Yeah. But you were just you. And I think that takes a lot of courage. And it's been such an honor to be part of it. And it's been fun to ask you different questions.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing us to life. You're the first person I think that ever like, I think you're the first, like I was saying this to Margaret a long time ago. I was like, aside from being invited to guest on podcasts, like I felt like I think you were the first person to ever like offer me to do something. You know what I mean? Who's like, hey, like I see you and like I think there's value to you. And like, you know what I mean? It was kind of, I felt like everything I've been a part of, I'd usually started or like, you know, and it was just like, oh no, like it was cool to get invited. It was really cool to get invited.
Well, I was going to be like really sad and be like, she's the first person to believe in us. But it does feel like in your career, you're oftentimes like applying, like you are the one that said, that would be a great opportunity for me. Let me prove it to you. And it did feel like the first time that we all got on the call together, you were already bought in. Like you were just like, let's go. And it was like, oh, I don't have to like prove my value to you before you're like willing to spend the time. And I do think that was something that was, gave us a lot of confidence that you were just like so supportive right out of the gate. So what I'm trying to say is find yourself a Rachel.
Yeah.
Well, find yourself. You got to get
find yourself a Rachel.
Yeah. Well, thank you for saying that.
Rachel, what's going to happen this fall? Like, what's going on? What are you thinking about this year? I just want to know before we go. This is selfish. I don't care if anyone listens. I just like want to know what is going on.
With the world, with Share Your Genius, with there's so many avenues. There's so many heroes' journeys right now that are happening.
Yes. I mean, I don't need to know like the news of the world, but like, what are you thinking about for this fall? Especially like as it relates to like what you're planning for Share Your Genius. Like what would be useful for any of us to know?
I think the thing I think about the most right now, and it goes back to sort of like the principal idea of like the brand that you're putting out into the world is the brand people associate with you. So like whatever that means, good, bad, negative, unintentional, etc. And to me, it's more around intentionality of like what you're putting out there is actually what you're putting out there, and people are seeing it. That's what's getting attached to you. That's why you two have been able to launch a show and people pay attention and listen, because you were building your brand over and over and over again by just being yourselves. But turns out, so what I'm thinking about more is like, if you are a person who is leading a brand and you're in charge of the content and the marketing and things like that, it's like, take control of it now. What is the narrative that you want going out into the marketplace, even if you're forming it, but put some intentionality around it, do it on purpose. Start with something like a podcast, because you can get so much out of it and use it in so many different ways and create that consistency across channels. But that's what I'm thinking a lot about. So it's less about, let's start a media brand, and it's more about, you already have a content brand. Let's do it on purpose for the reasons that you want it to be, and do that.
I love that. I was media brand, it doesn't mean anything. This was like the reason why we started Don't Say Content.
Don't say media brand.
Don't say media brand.
It literally doesn't mean anything. And it's like, it's so like, it's one of those highly interpretive terms. It is not clear what it looks like. So anybody can think like building a media brand looks different, which means that it's like the perfect thing for founders. We're like, oh, a shiny thing. I want to build a media brand. And you're like, you don't even know what you're talking about.
That's what I'm saying. It's like, you already have a brand. Let's do it on purpose. And let's create content that allows you to do it in a way that's like cohesive. And to your point earlier, consistent.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm so for that, where it's like, also like the internal cultural values then become the external brand values. And like that, I'm not to always talk about my new job, but I'm really into it right now. That's something that I like feel a lot of ownership over, especially because it's a team that doesn't have like a people function yet. And so it's like, I feel ownership over how do the internal cultural values become codified, because that will become the external brand values, because everyone then will just be able to like, especially in the age of folks sharing on LinkedIn and creating their own individual brands, like if all of those people have the same values, right, and can speak about them publicly, you've just like created an army of on-brand content creators.
Brands really need right now, not gonna lie.
Yeah, and you give those people a mic.
Yeah, because like, I don't know, I feel like the kind of blind following of brands is like those days of kind of slow, like it's changed since the pandemic. I'm not saying it'll stay that way forever, but like you got to try a lot harder to keep the team kind of marching in the same direction. This was great.
It's always so fun, Rachel.
This was fun. Thanks for having me again.
I'm not gonna lie, I was a little stressed out about like I was like, oh, I have like summer hair. You know what I mean? I was like, oh, like I have to look. I put glasses on because I was like, I'm definitely not putting makeup on.
I love those glasses.
I was like, this is a hard, like, that was a lot. That was a lot for me.
I put the touch-up filter on, so.
Yeah. Margaret, we have a lot to catch up on. We need to have like a friend chat.
Dude,
Rachel,
you're telling me we got a lot to catch up on.
Oh, whoa.
No, it's mostly good stuff. Okay. Mostly good stuff.
Okay.
You know, ups and downs.
Mine's a mixed bag.
See, you should keep recording and then put a Patreon wall behind, and I guarantee people would want to know what you two talk about after this.
I thought about like, because, you know, like I have a bunch of high school, college friends that are all over, honestly, the world at this point. And I was like, how funny would it be to have like just a private podcast that only your friends subscribe to, and you just like dish the tea. You're like, this is what's going on in my life these days.
It's called a group chat. And
I would subscribe to that.
I've got like high school friends. They're not in the same group chat. You know, I need a distribution source. Right now, I just like do voice notes in my car about all my juicy goss and send that to people.
Oh my God. I wanted to start a line of t-shirts that said, no, I will not join your group text.
Wait, entrepreneurial endeavors. Something that I did since the last time we chatted was I launched a line of stickers. And I made $300 off of stickers so far. They say there's sort of like
about that
software, and they're hysterical. And
they're amazing. I love them.
Apparently they resonated.
I actually need your advice on that because I might be playing with something later this year. And I was like, how?
Oh my God,
as per usual, Margaret does it first. And then I'm always like, Margaret, how'd you do that? Can you teach me? Can you tell me everything? And then someone comes along and thinks I'm really smart. And I'm like, well, you just do this, this, and I learned it all from Margaret.
But it takes someone smart to learn from Margaret. So you can still be smart.
I can't teach no dummies.
That's right.
Yeah. All right.
All right, everybody. Good to see your faces. Good to see the not faces because we can't see you, but glad you were here. Jane, hi. Katie, bye.
Hi, y'all.